We're continuing on with session 3 of our 4-part series of SPM Resource Management Workspace. My name is Josh Sutton. I'm Principal Product Excellence Manager for SPM here at ServiceNow. And we'll always start with our safe harbor. Essentially, this is anything said forward-looking is not guaranteed with the dates that we state. Also, don't make any purchasing decisions based on these forward-looking statements. Our previous sessions we see listed here. Today, we're talking about capacity planning with SPM's resource management and assignment capabilities. I want to call out our next session. It was previously a week earlier, but because of Nexus event, we're actually pushing it out 1 week. So be aware of that. If you registered in advance, it's now September 23rd rather than I believe it was the 16th. And if you want to, obviously, this event is also on our live on now. We have future events coming up, always happening. We've got some EA things coming up, which is awesome. So scan the QR code and see what we've got. Continually to check that. We also post them in other places as well.
Thanks.
We'll keep going. As with all of our sessions, we have saved time for Q&A. I'm going to do some live Q&A as well. So if you're asking questions using our Q&A feature, excuse me, we're going to hold some for the end and we'll be discussing them live. Also, there may be some that I answer just based on the content that we have. So we've got some good panelists in the background here helping me answer questions throughout. And please use the Q&A for questions. Do not use the chat for questions. We're just going to redirect you to Q&A anyway. The purpose of this is we're actually capturing the questions and answers, so that we have them afterwards. So that's why we drive people towards that Q&A. It allows us to actually go back and answer them, and as well as capture them for future follow-ups and things like that. As with the previous ones, this presentation is going to be recorded. We will share it. It's about 7 to 10 days after the event when that'll be shared. Also, a call out to subscribe to Quick Start Guide for Resource Management, because we post these there as well. And anytime we add them to that article, we will allow you, well, notification will go out. And then after the event, there is a short survey. Please fill it out. I appreciate the previous 2 sessions. We're getting some really good feedback. It's the only way that we're going to get better is if we hear from you all. So please take the time to do it. It takes about 5 minutes. Thanks so much. Okay, moving into, we're going to do a little bit of a recap from session 2 and expand on some of the topics. It's going to be very short, but I wanted to circle back on some things. We're going to talk about what is capacity planning, look at the strategic and portfolio planning workspaces, talk a little bit about best practices, and then we'll do Q&A. Within the workspaces section, I'm going to be doing a live demo as well, just walking through some things that are very, I think, pertinent to using that area. We're going to talk about what does work, what doesn't work, some things like that. We'll show it live. We'll finalize with some Q&A, and then we've got the resources that we always send. So starting first with our poll. Are you already using, or have you started using, portfolio or strategic planning workspace? No, it's on the roadmap. Yes. What's that now? And hopefully we'll get that what's that now cleared up by the end of this. Always aim for about 75% of the participants. Awesome. Got some people that just went live. That's great. Hopefully we can enhance that experience with this session today, get you a little bit more on there. And actually, we're seeing a lot of people that are already using it, which is fantastic. We're just about to 70%. Oh, there we go. We hit it. Yep, thanks for that. There is the difference between portfolio and strategic planning, and that's the licensing essentially, right? Pro versus standard. There are plenty of capabilities with portfolio planning workspace. You just get a bump on that with the strategic, and um, we've got some good guides about the differences, and I'll point those out here today. All right, we're at 73%. I'm gonna go ahead and close it. It's fantastic. 44% of you are already using either portfolio or strategic planning today. 37%, it's on the roadmap. I think that's fantastic. So I'm really hoping this is going to tip the scale for those that are not on there, clear it up for those that aren't really aware of it, and then give you all some good tools for your toolkit, um, the ones that are using it or have it on the roadmap. Great. So moving in, let's recap. And I'm going to set the stage with planning attributes. There's a couple things. First of all, you saw this in session 2. This is where we're going to be focusing today on the planning attributes and capacity planning from a kind of an implementation path perspective. We're not going to go into the details of the implementation, but you can see, as well as the last session, we've got the link at the bottom there. We do a full-on walkthrough. So, but we really want to get into the core of how to do it. One of the things from the previous session, we've got this allocation type of monthly versus weekly. And I went over the default value. You can set it from monthly to weekly, all of that. But I want to be very clear on something. Within the workspaces, this is your key here. So even if you've got a default value set, when I toggle within Resource Management Workspace or within Project Workspace, the monthly to weekly will actually provide the allocation type when I create a new resource assignment, right? So that default value is really pretty much the form view is where it really matters. But within Resource Management Workspace or Project Workspace, if I'm doing it within those areas, that's how I can toggle it one way or the other. And so if you're thinking about, we always need weekly and we don't want to go to a monthly, this is an educational thing for your users, as well as setting that to the default from a UI perspective, which you can also do. So just wanted to point these out. And then we talked about the planning attributes. I won't rehash this because today, but kind of give people that maybe weren't on the second session. Out of box, we have 3 default planning attributes. We have the group, the role, and the skill. Those are associated with our user profile. But we're going to talk a little bit more about the custom attributes this session. And the reason for that is because it actually influences your not only your resource management, but also the capacity planning of things. So we're going to talk about the location. Cost center is another one that we see. Also department, it's seen pretty frequently. But as far as what we're going to be looking at today, I've actually got a custom attribute of location. And right now we're going to show you how to add a custom attribute, custom planning attribute. This is linked, and on the next slide, you'll see where to actually find that information of doing all of these things. But let's take a look. We will navigate to the planning attributes. This could be found underneath project administration or strategic planning. Regardless, it's the same whether you go to one location or the other. We'll create a new one called department, and I do want to enable it for capacity planning because I want it for both resource and capacity. Now, I don't want to add an additional field to the employee profile table because I know that the department table field is already on my user record. So I can hop once from the employee profile. So I'm going to the employee profile, to the user, to the department. And I will save that. You can see that I cannot set this to active because I haven't mapped the fields on these different tables. So for each table, we would need to select from the resource allocation those fields. Well, I haven't created those yet. So if you are using something that does not exist, you just have to create them, and you'll walk to the user records department location. So let's take a look at my location attribute that I already created. You can see that I've got fields on each one of the 4 that are needed for both capacity planning and resource management, because capacity planning uses assignments. So now when I navigate to the Resource Management Workspace, and let's pull up I can see that the location field is now populated. And since I had already created this one prior to having the location, it did not automatically populate it. However, if I get rid of the user and put it back, I can see it will automatically populate on any new ones going forward once I assign a user. I can also use location as the need for the type of person. Just like our role or our group or our skill as an attribute, now my location field can also be leveraged that way. So one of the other things that we have a guide for is to include that new attribute in the group by. This is fantastic because I have my HR teams. Now if I go to primary group, I can see I've got 3 groups. Well, let's reduce that a little bit. And I just want to look at my IT HR solutions team. So now I don't need to filter by primary group because it's the only group that I've now selected for my card. So I can get rid of that. And now I have all my resources. Just like with the primary role, now I can look at the primary role, and based on my data analysts, I can actually see the allocations, utilization, so on and so forth. But what if I want to see my location? I now am able to do a group by with that custom attribute to see in Australia for my team and the different information based on that group by as well. So just recapping on that, the custom attribute based on, where you're going to be, so we'll call it, so from a slicing and dicing perspective, if you will, right, that how do I want to see my data? Adding relevant additional attributes for your organization is key, right? Because not everybody just has one location or is in one area. Not everybody just has the need to, or doesn't have the need for departments. So we want to be able to allow you to expand. These links here will take you through essentially what you just saw, as well as some additional things. So as always, I say start at the quick start guide because that's your kind of, we'll say starting point, your anchor point. And then we have additional blog articles for configuring the planning attribute and then adding those additional columns if I want to see them in my project workspace or resource management workspace to have those different planning at the new custom attribute showing. And then finally adding the custom attribute to that group by. There's a guide for that, which includes editing or adding additional data for these 3 script includes. Okay, again, these are out there on the community. Well, actually, this one was just launched about a week and a half ago, so that's fresh for y'all. Before we move into it, I'm just going to ask my other panelists, were there any questions that came in regarding the custom planning attributes? And maybe we wanted to answer live.
There is, sorry, Josh. There's a question for custom attributes. You will be able to see the custom attribute as a criteria to filter when creating resource cards.
That is a great question. When I get into the live demo, I will show that. I think that is obviously pertinent because we want to use those attributes to filter out the people that we're seeing, right? Not just based on the, if we're using a group or a role. So yes, and I'll show you that just a little bit when we get into the live demo. Great question. Okay. I'm going to keep going, make sure we're on track. So getting into capacity planning. What is capacity planning? We saw this in the very first session. It's not something that you do before execution, but as ongoing way to steer your portfolio, if you will, right? It's meant to balance the supply of your workers with the demand of work coming in. So we can visualize how demand aligns to the available resources, identify the constraints and conflicts early, right? Or midstream even. And then, do we have enough capacity to deliver our strategy? Where are the gaps? And should we shift timelines or add headcount? Those are the questions that you're going to be able to answer or at least gain insights into with capacity planning. Before we get into more of that, I want to do almost like a PSA that capacity planning and resource management, although they work together, they are very different, especially when you get into the applications for capacity planning and resource management. So we think about capacity planning. Do we have enough resources to complete the work we have planned versus who is going to complete the work, right? We're in capacity planning. We don't get down to the individual users. We get down to those attributes and, we can see what their effort is based on those, but we don't get down to the who. That's resource management. Capacity is what projects can we work on versus what projects are we working on? Do we determine the demand versus the supply variance? Whereas in resource management, we're determining over and under utilization. The approved work based on availability, and we say that because capacity planning uses the lenses and prioritized work based on your portfolio or strategic lens. That is what's showed. Whereas in resource management, it's about allocated people to the projects, right? Again, getting down to that user or that most granular layer. Capacity planning is forecast future resource hiring skills gaps. Do we need to move things or do we need to hire? Versus we're identifying overload of those skills and resources. Finally, focusing on those attributes versus now we're focusing on named resources. There's a lot of shared space where with resource management, yeah, we will focus on the attributes, but it's just to get the named resources in the way that we need to see them, right? Same thing with forecasting. Resource management can absolutely look forward and into the future, but we're not using it to necessarily identify, or we can use it to identify the skill or the hiring and needs and things like that. But from a capacity planning perspective, that's where it really is just the numbers. And that's the difference that we're trying to make here. Strategic, high level, long term versus tactical, detailed, and shorter term. Okay. So another view we want to take a look at is the attribute model. So resources versus work items. Our resource management is really focused on the resource assignments for those work items, your various attributes. Capacity planning is getting the attributes for capacity estimation, meaning my group has this many people or this is this percent utilized, my role, my skill. By the way, if I break it down and I stack those different attributes, now I'm seeing the role of this group has this capacity estimation for so on and so forth. With resource assignments, we're really building that effort estimation and utilizing also the configurable attributes for capacity planning to show us our capacity plan. So we need both of this set of data. So it's not necessarily versus resource management, it's and with resource management to gain that full picture. Because we can talk capacity all day long from an estimation perspective, but if we don't have that actual assignment and showing the work items that's where they're going to be estimated for, we can't get that full picture of the true capacity plan. Finally, where do decisions happen? So we think about, like I stated, we need to estimate the effort. So our resource assignments on our projects or the tasks or the other work items, demands, those types of things, we need to estimate that effort. Those work items are then included into our portfolio plan, and the assignments are then associated within those planning items as well. Finally, or second, we have to do management of capacity. So we need to generate this capacity for the different attributes. And there is a scheduled job. Again, we have some resources out there for that that I'll kind of target later in the session. But I'm also going to show you how to manually generate capacity in our live demo as well. So once we've done that for that kind of segregated time frame, now we can actually use our capacity planning. And again, we'll show that in the live demo here in just a few minutes. The capacity planning is now based off of our portfolio plan or our strategic lens, we'll call it, the lens that we're looking at within portfolio and strategic planning workspaces. We can then finally analyze our capacity based on that as well. So I'm going to jump right in. As I stated, there's some things that I wanted to show. And from a capacity perspective, let me just back up really quick. I'm going to use this HR department portfolio. I can see that I've got it set for this year and is a project portfolio, meaning I'm getting my work items based on the lens of a portfolio, which is my HR portfolio. We've got plenty of material on SPW and PPW, setting that up and things like that. That we're not going to do that here just because we need to stay focused on the capacity planning and the resource management side of things, right? So first lens, once we get into there, I'm going to actually go back to my default view just so I can show you another tailoring. So the planning state is very important from a prioritized perspective. That's what's actually going to show up on not only our roadmap, but also for our capacity. And we can see this based on the prioritized work items. Now, if we get rid of that, when I come down here, I can see the non-prioritized work items. However, I can't do anything with these because this is for prioritized work items only. That's the way that the system was designed. So therefore, that's what we have, right? So I'm going to set that back just so we don't get, there we go. Now we're back. One of the other things I want to show you down here is this little legend. So we can see the legend up here, right? We're within capacity or we're over capacity. The red, or it's at risk, doesn't necessarily mean over capacity, but it's at risk. Blue is no risk. if we didn't have a planning item with resource assignments on here, it would be in yellow. And then I want to call this one out too. This is in progress, locked in. We can see that indicated by this right here, right? That little icon there. The reason for that is if I need to shift dates and things like that, that's not going to happen. I can't do it. And I'll show you that here in a second. So before we get to this, we actually need to do something called generate the capacity. So I'm going to take a look at my program managers for the start month of January and end month of December for 2025. If I didn't have any, it would say you do not have capacity for this attribute. I would have to then generate capacity. So I can do different groups, different roles, different skills, whatever the case may be. And I can regenerate, if say I change the dates, right? I go out to 2026. I can then regenerate the capacity if it hasn't been. But again, there is a scheduled job as well. Maybe one of the panelists can post that in the chat, what that scheduled job is. And we'll definitely make sure that you get that at the end as well. So once I've generated the capacity for the time frame, now I can actually go back into here and make sure that if I didn't see any data or the groups, the roles, whatever, which is set here, if I hadn't actually gone into here, and I apologize, I'm kind of going back a bit. If I just click capacity and I hadn't done anything yet, I would get this screen. Let's set it up. And it'd say, what am I doing my capacity review? What resource and criteria are we looking at? I've got it set to group and auto select. The auto select will pull in the defaulted resource assignment attributes that have already been associated within my lens. So the work items within my lens, right? I can also manually select if I want to see more, but quite frankly, it's not going to give me much data based on that. But I will show you one more thing, just so we can have that lens here. So my Java developers group is not associated with any work item within my portfolio lens. And so now I'm going to come in here. And based on this, I can see that they don't show up because there's nothing here for them, right? So you can put as many as you want in here, but because of my lens for my HR department portfolio and the work items associated, there's nothing to be seen there, right? Next thing we want to take a look at, now that we've got our resource capacity generated and we've got the right resource criteria for this, by default, it groups it by any capacity planning attributes. And I can see I've got group, location, role, and skill. See that custom attribute that we just added was the location. Well, it'll automatically show up here because I checked it for capacity planning. So the interesting thing about this is my HR process team, I've got one individual that does not have, or I've got a resource assignment that does not have a location. So now I'm going to get this unspecified, right? And I can see that also here by the skill because I've got all four selected. So if you're in a lens that doesn't use skills or a certain attribute, you can actually come in and say, I don't want to see location after group. By default, it just puts it into alphabetically. I'm going to unselect all of these because I still want group to be my first one. But second, I want role. So you can see now, because I unselected, it turns up as number 2. And then if I want to go to location, I can have it as number 3 and skip the skill altogether. So now it completely flips around to where it's now group, role, and location without any skill. However, I still got these issues here because I don't have, remember, I don't have that location on this resource assignment. So for all intents and purposes, I'm just going to get rid of the location for right now. And now my data is pretty clean. You saw all the red things are no longer there. Everything is blue, which means there's no risk. And that's because it was showing risk because it didn't have the data. So don't think that you're at risk just because it's being flagged. You really need to understand the data that you're portraying here. And there, hopefully that gives you some insight on how to change it so that you're getting just the data that you are using, right? So let's take a look right now at my program managers. By doing this, I can see that the program managers have a role of project managers, and I have a total capacity during this time frame of 7. So I've got 7 project manager roles within the program manager group, right? And my total estimate, again, based off of those resource assignments, the summary is a 2.46, right? And so then I come up to my full availability is 4.54, and this is an FTE. If I want to see it a little bit differently, I can say percentage utilized, right? Your capacity, 0%, it's 100% in all reality. But now I've got my total estimate utilization of 35.414. Same thing with the overall, because all of my program managers in the group have the role of project manager. If I drop this down, I can see maybe a little bit different variance because IT HR Solutions has a 2.93%, but my architect role has a 3.75, right? So this is where you'll get the different utilizations, but we're going to stick with program managers here real quick. So my total estimate is based off of what? It's based off of these prioritized work items. That's where I'm getting it. So I can see, quite frankly, I have no conflict. And I'm going to switch over to FTE really quick. I'm only using about 1/3 of my resources for this overall. If I want to just see one, right? Because I don't want to get into the having to drill down and all of that kind of stuff that can be a little bit tedious. I want to see specific work items. Well, you can actually just click on the work items here, and then it will filter up here the group roles that have estimates based on those, right? So I can see my HR process team has a business relationship manager. My IT HR solutions has an architect and a quality analyst. And then I have my program managers with the project manager allocated, right? So this is the different ways of being able to just kind of see the data the way that I care about it when I'm coming in here and check on it. The way to get back is just click on the same one that you had selected and it deselects it essentially, right? So I'm going to go back to that project manager role because there's something that this story does not tell me. Remember, we talk about capacity versus named resources. I'm going to switch over to my Resource Management Workspace. Even though this says I've got plenty of capacity, let's actually tell the whole story. So I can see here, I've got my project managers. And what is this? Davis is actually way over allocated. He's at 173%, right? That's because he's allocated to all 5 of these projects. My capacity does not reflect that. But my resource board does because I'm looking at the individual users. I can see Claire, Don, they don't have anything. So this is where I'm telling the full story now. And I can say I need to reassign some of these things to the people that don't have any allocations at the moment. They're not being utilized. Or if my full team is utilized, right, I'm going to start getting those red flags, those at risk, like I was seeing when I didn't have the appropriate filters on. So if I needed to, I could then shift. So I can see that I can actually bring this up or I can bring it out. Now it's constrained by the end date, so you can't go past the end date of my view. So just be aware of that. If I need to go further out, I will have to change the lens settings to actually go further out. But because I have that constraint, that it won't let me go past the end date. But say I need to move this one out. If I set this, all I needed to do was drag that for the project perspective. And now my dates of that project have shifted. Let's take a look at that one right here. So fiscal year 2025, internal transfer, I can see my dates shifted back out. My resource assignments also did, but they didn't really hit the right dates. So that's why we have resources not synced. So I just come in here and I would shift my resource dates and they back now align to my planned start and end date. So the challenge with this is, or the benefit of this is I have not started this project. The dates are not locked in. I also have no actuals on my resource assignments. Two key factors that will lock down the date changes from within Portfolio Planning Workspace. And that's where this indicator here says locked, right? Duration of planning items with actual dates cannot be changed. So I've already started this project here, which would not allow me to move from here. If I needed to move them, I would have to come into the project workspace here and do it. But I can see that I've got actuals on here. So my planned start date is static. Even if my approved dates changed, my plans will not. I also have project tasks. Those are what is actually indicating the work in progress and the actual start date for my overall project, right? If this was still pending or open, that means I don't have actuals right now. I can move it. If my resource assignments had actuals, I would also not be able to move the dates. So let's go back to our capacity planning and let's look a little bit more at this kind of changes. So I set this to group and role. I can see number 1, number 2. If I wanted to add location, I could also do that. And again, because of the lack of data for either the resource assignments that don't have that field populated or my users that do not have an attribute populated, now I can see that I've gotten flags here. And that's because it can't actually roll it up to an estimate, right? I don't know what the capacity is because my location is unspecified. Right? But let's say the data was clean and I've got locations on all of that. Remember when I first came into here, the default view sets it as 1 through 4, or how many attributes you have in that alphabetical order. But I changed the order. Well, I can actually save this as a new view. And I can also share it or save it as a shared view. So let's take a look. Let's save this as a new view. I'm going to say the HR I'm going to share it as a shared view. And this view has been created successfully. So now as I go in and out, it will allow me to get back to that. I've also got a couple other views that I have that were shared. Let's take a look at this group role plan view. Now I'm just going to see the group and the role. without the location or skill, right? Because that's my clean data. So just know that that is kind of key thing to be able to look at the data the way that you want to see it every time you come back in. Finally, I'll talk about just this data here. As we expand and all of that, we can click onto this to see some good information, right? So what does this 6.34 mean? Well, that really means that that's my availability. That's not my capacity. My capacity is 8. I have 8 people, 8 resources, and that's based on the different total capacities, right? So obviously this doesn't have any estimates, so my availability is my capacity. But as I drop these down and get a little bit further in, I can see the total capacity of each qualifier. And if I want to see it rolled up at any level, I just simply click into here and I can see the overall capacity for my group, the HR process team, is 8. Same thing here, business relationship manager role within the group, I've got 1, right? My availability is 0.84, which is what's showing here. And my total estimate is 0.16, which is accounting for the decreasing of my availability. If I were to have other things, so let's do this really quick. Let's create an operational assignment for my HR process team. Okay, I'm going to go into my resource board and I'm actually going to change this over to weekly and I want FTE. Wonderful. So I'm going to come into Resource Management Workspace and just drop this down to new operational assignment. I'm going to do it based off of my group, which is the HR process team. And I'm going to check some training time for my group, right? So let's do first half 2025 training. And I want to protect 10% of the capacity for my team. Start date, we're going to start at the beginning of the year and end it halfway through. Okay. And because I'm just going to go ahead and approve this automatically. There we go. Switch back over to my primary group. This challenge with live demos. Sometimes it can just take a little bit longer, but I can see that I've got now an operational plan for 0.1 or 10% capacity for each one of my HR process team members, right? So let's take a look and let's refresh this because I want to make sure that when I'm looking at capacity, if there's things that are outside of this lens that I'm looking at, which is the HR portfolio at the moment, in my team, either my group or the roles that I'm responsible for are being staffed elsewhere, I want to be able to make sure that's accounting for that. I don't want to just see that. Well, that's when we get down into this, the additional items. So what this say is as either it's operational work or we'll have something outside of this lens. So if I were to business relationship manager, and let's do something that's outside of the HR portfolio. And this is within the date range as well, which is great. Let me just add a resource here. Okay. I only have one, so I should be able to just get Robin. Awesome. So now I've got a resource assignment. Let's wait till it flips over. I've got a resource assignment for 0.25 FTE for Robin, who is a business relationship manager within my HR process team group. When I come back here, again, refresh, as things change, things move. We need to make sure that we're keeping the data up. Now I can come into underneath my HR process team, business relationship manager, and total estimates. I've got additional items. I've got operational work, and I've also got estimate outside portfolio. So just because our work for this lens is outside of that lens does not mean it's not accounted for. So my business relationship manager actually has only 40% availability, even though the work within here is a 0.25, because I've got an extra 0.25 and 0.1 outside of my portfolio lens. Hopefully that was more than helpful. I'm going to wrap with some best practices before we get into the Q&A. Use planning attributes as a reflection for your strategic lens. Obviously, we want to make sure that we're putting things within our lens or our view of capacity planning that are actually reflected within my lens. If I don't have skills, if I don't have those other things, not using those planning attributes, I don't need them, right? So tailor your views. Regularly review the plans to ensure conflicts, right? Things change, things move around, things happen, new things get added. We want to take a look at it from those lenses as well. But again, it doesn't tell the full picture. So we want to make sure that we're not using capacity planning for that operating resource management. It's about the big picture. Your resource management gets into that deeper into the weeds, and it actually shows the over and under allocations, right? Whereas capacities just shows we have enough people to do the work. Finally, make sure any changes are communicated, right? Those making changes within capacity planning workspace and within the portfolio lens. If I change dates and things like that, and I'm the strategic portfolio manager, I need to communicate that, or doing it in a session with my project managers, my resource managers, all of that. You don't just do it and hope that they're going to catch it, right? That's the big thing. Finally, we've got our training and enablement. Thank you guys for the questions. Really appreciate it. We'll answer more as we go through the Q&A after this. But training and enablement resources, kind of same as always. Make sure that you get out there, get to the quick start guides, different customer success. We've got impact. We've got training and certifications. We've got our expert services. Finally, thank you for all that have joined. We will see you at the next session. Anybody coming to Nexus, we will see you there. Hopefully you can make it. Otherwise, remember the date changed. It's now September 23rd for the fourth and final session.